In any case, the reason I got into this project, and I have a lot of people to thank for it, not only all the curators in the European cabinets and the ANS, but my colleague Chris Lane, who works on the mint at Potosi. Tulane is lucky to have two professors in the history department who are both numismatists and collectors, and we share a lot of information with each other. Chris is working with handheld technology in the New World in the 16th century, and he actually has the documents of what a mint looks like in a Spanish colonial setting, and it can't be all that different in its main outline to a Roman mint. I also have a very good friend who is Professor Emeritus of Medieval History. He's been extremely helpful with his eye in art history, and a dear friend who is an ABD in classical China who collects Chinese coins and knows bronze technology of China very well. So I'm fortunate to have these friends and colleagues on call, and I've had many a session with them. I got into this project because, as you know, and Rachel, who's just told me she's working on cities on the Levantine shore, I worked a great deal in Asia Minor, and my time in Turkey has come something to an end under the current regime after 2016, the coup. And I've been finishing up work there. And I hope to have that volume on the Gordian coins out, with a lot of coins Alexander the Great, for the future. But I decided to shift interest over to the European provinces to deal with some of the same problems and not dealing with the bureaucracy of the AKP, which I am no friend. And I landed on the coins of Moesia, Inferior, and Thrace because of the face-to-face portraits, which is a common feature on coins in Asia Minor, particularly large medallion-sized coins. I've worked on the coins of Strata Nicaea, which is got these face-to-face portraits in the Sphaean age in a series of succession. And these coins in Thrace and Moesia Inferior had some advantages to them, because I found very quickly that I could ask questions about technology. How were the coins actually produced? How did you take the metal and turn it into the coins that were then distributed in circulation? And I'm revising coinage in the Roman economy as a long-term project. And I thought, well, I really should put a chapter on that issue. And then I started to work on it. And I came across these coins and began to realize that, well, this is a whole study in and of itself. So what I'm offering is some preliminary study based on my initial work in the coin cabinets in 2019 and working with published holdings, and then assembling a very, very large collection of my own, since I'm an avid collector and I've put my resources to that. You see a coin of Macrinus and Diadumenian, issued in the legateship of Pontianus, whose name is on the reverse. And I'm concentrating on the reign of Macrinus and Diadumenian tonight because it offers an idea of the scale of production when one of these mints really wanted to go into action. And that we'll get to in a moment. Let me see if I can move on. The cities involved are mostly on the shore. You can see most of them marked on this map, downloaded from the internet. Tomis, Istris, Colletus, Odessus. The little city of Dionysopolis is not represented. Mesembria, Anchialos. All the way over inland is also Nicopolis ad Istrum. That is connected to the city of Marcianopolis, which is inland from Odessus. And in the period that we're studying, the Sphaean age and later, functioned as the provincial capital of the reorganized province of Moesia Inferior. Let me see. I think the next map is also helpful. Here, this shows the provincial boundaries more clearly in the time we're under consideration, and I believe Dionysopolis might be on there. It's a rather small city. Yes, it is. You notice most of the cities are on the shore. The only city inland is Marcianopolis, and that is connected by the highway to Nicopolis ad Istrum, which is undoubtedly a base and R&R center for the army on the lower Danube. And undoubtedly, many of the coins issued in the marketplace in Nicopolis ad Istrum would have been exchanged against silver coins brought by Roman soldiers when they're spending their pay in that city. The reason that cities in the late 2nd and 3rd century wanted to coin civic money. I have discussed that. Many other fine scholars have discussed that. I know Rachel will probably come up to her conclusions there. Many of us initially thought that it was for asserting of sovereign rights as an independent city. It's a throwback to being a polis, and one of the signs of sovereignty is coining your own money. There are several inscriptions and also formula on coins of Asia Minor, such as Semenu and others, that suggest that this was the exercise of a civic right. And one of the many items brought up in the petitions that the poor Roman emperor had to nod his head and agree to every time these talkative Greeks showed up to tell them that their city was worthy of this exemption, this privilege, whatever, and coinage was among them. And I do think it was an important reason, but in studying the production and distribution of the coins, it's clear that the economic factor was probably just as important and maybe even more important for many of these cities. One of the questions that immediately many of us have posed, I'm not original in this, and it was first answered by Conrad Kraft, is you have so many cities in the late 2nd and 3rd century AD issuing their own money, money in their own names. There could not possibly be 575 or 600 individual mints across the Balkans and Asia Minor, let alone getting into Rachel's territory of the Levant with production of different coins there, provincial as well as civic. So Kraft speculated, and correctly, that there would be these workshops, Werkstätte in German, as he called them, which would be production centers. He was never quite sure, were they permanent centers or did engravers move from city to city and engrave the coins on demand and then move on to the next commission? There are coins in Roman Pontus that might suggest that, dated coins, obviously cut by the same engravers over a period of several years and dated by local era. Or were the coins produced on order and then shipped out, or were the dies just cut and shipped to the individual cities? One of the phenomena that Kraft noticed was that many of the coins shared the same obverse die. We have some examples from this region, from Moesia Inferior. The most important example are medallion-sized coins issued by 3 cities. Here are 2 of the examples, Odessus and Tomes. The other is Marcianopolis, where clearly the same engraver engraved 1 or 2 major dies for large medallion coins, and they were used for striking coins for 3 different cities. The reverse, of course, being appropriate to that city with an ethnic and a design that was pleasing to the city who had probably commissioned the piece. Significantly, in Moesia Inferior and Thrace, we don't find many of these shared obverse dies, whereas in Asia Minor, we have many examples of this, and also many examples of very, very close engraving that they look like dead ringers, but from the same hand. I know of Olinda and Stratonikea, an obverse die of young Caracol and Plautilla are so close it looks almost like a die link except for the inscription. Then you have cities in Lydia where 7 and 8 cities will share an obverse die. Others of anonymous or these little pseudo-anonymous, as they're called, coins without reference to the imperial family. They might have the Hierosyncletos or the Boule, the Demos, and a number of cases where as many as 7 or 8 cities might be sharing that obverse die. They don't appear in this part of the Roman world very much. In fact, the best count is that there is only something like 7 instances in the 2nd and 3rd century in the whole of Thrace and Moesia Inferior where an obverse die is shared to make coins of 2 cities. Part of that might be that most of the coins I'm studying are the standard denomination that was issued for circulation. These would be 5 azaria or 4 azaria pieces. And the area tends not also to strike many coins with the non-imperial portraits. So that might account for it. It's only a surmise. That's the best explanation I can give. But the clear point is there's not much die sharing going on. On the other hand, there's a lot of similar engraving. And there's been a lot of speculation about where are the Werkstätte in this part of the Roman world. Let's go back to the map for a moment. Several scholars have plausibly offered Odessus, the port, which is today Varna in Bulgaria. Because it's a major port, it would have easy communication with most of the cities on the Euxine shore of these two provinces. It's very plausible. Odessus was one of the cities that shared that magnificent Avrstai of Gordian III as Cosmocrator. On the other hand, I believe that it should be assigned to Marcianopolis. This is an unpublished coin that came in a coin lot I purchased in my mad effort to learn this coinage. Usually I declare this is the project and then I start buying coins, and the dealers, of course, love me. And when I originally saw it, it came in a lot of coins from CNG. I immediately knew what was going on. It is an obverse portrait. I can identify the die very easily in the standard catalog of Marcianopolis and the catalog of Nicopolis. The obverse die is a face-to-face portrait of Macrinus and Diadumenian, which was an extremely large coinage, as we'll see at this point. The reverse die is Nicopolis, one of the city gates, which is a common design there. At the time of Macrinus's reign, there is an extensive coinage for Macrinus and Diadumenian, but they do not use the face-to-face portrait design. Nicopolis ad Istrum, for whatever reason, only used that design very, very early in the reign of Septimius Severus and then dropped it and never used it on later coins, whereas the face-to-face design becomes the standard design of the main denomination of Marcianopolis and is adopted by other cities such as Odessus, Dionysopolis, Mesembria, Ankaleia. All of these cities take the lead from Marcianopolis. I think this is pretty much the best evidence we have that the Werkstätte was probably at Marcianopolis. It had to be minted at a location where both dies were available. And what I think is going on, given the name of the governor on the reverse of this coin, that what we're looking at is the carrying over of a die that was used to strike the coins of Macrinus and Diadumenian in the name of Marcianopolis for the first 6 months or so of the reign when Pontianus was governor. And then it was carried over for Agrippa's governorship, who was the last of the three governors. The first governor, Statulinus, was only 2 months, and we have some coins of him. But most of the coins are struck from the other two legates. And each of these legates, based on epigraphic evidence, were in office for about 6 months. As you remember, Macrinus was overthrown in June of 218 by the revolt on behalf of Elagabalus, masterminded by his grandma, Julia Maesa. So it's an extremely short reign of about 16 months. And two of those periods, 6-month periods, were these two successive governors. So what's happened is you've got a mule. It's carried over from the other and is evidence that probably it's Marcianopolis. And Marcianopolis makes sense because, as I said, it's located on that main highway running to Nicopolis ad Istrum. It's got easy access through the port of Odessus to distribute coins all along the Euxine shore, which are the other cities that are clearly ordering coins from Marcianopolis. Now, we don't have die links, but we certainly have so many similarities in engraving. And this is the first point I want to talk to in looking about these coins. You can see the reverse type of the Serapis figure. They're extremely close in gesture and everything. There are a large number of stereotype designs used by all of these cities. Less so by Nicopolis, but by all the other coastal cities and Marcianopolis for sure. In sorting these coins, if the legend is all obscured on the reverse, it's easy to mistake the coin of one city for another if you're just looking at the images. This is true of the Tyche, the Hegira, the Asclepius, right down to gestures. Even the more unusual depictions of these divinities can easily be seen on the coins of two other cities at the same time in the same reign. So you're dealing with an atelier of engravers. Also, in studying the coins, and I owe a real debt of gratitude to my friend Grady Hardy, Professor Emeritus in Art History at Tulane, who has worked in medieval manuscripts and gave me a whole session one afternoon on how do you make a medieval manuscript? How are the pictures illuminated, the lettering, who does the master work, the key pictures, who does the design. This is all a division of labor, which I suspect is also used in the engraving of these coins. The best engraver is probably put to the imperial portraits you see here, one of Gordian and Serapis, the other of Gordian and his wife Tranquillina. The reverse would be to engravers who had doing stereotype designs, these reverse types with a few exceptions, an emperor in triumph, Triumph of Vega or Quadriga, the emperor in combat. Those are probably exceptional, but most of them are pretty standard designs that you find for every reign and are shared among the cities. And those could easily be assigned to the engraver of the second rank. The lettering, I suspect, were done by apprentices. And if you look closely at the examples I give you, you'll see that the lettering of the obverse and the reverse are often quite different. That someone is engraving the reverse die, the image, and then probably an apprentice is putting in the letters. And these dies are just being matched up by what is sometimes called a box method by the numismatists. That is, at the end of the day, you collect all the dies, you put them in a box, boxes, lock them up. The next day, the workmen come in and you issue them at random, which is one possible pattern. But for instance, on the one below, you'll see there's always these, you have the square sigma, whereas the obverse uses the rounded sigma. You get different types of litigers on both the obverse and reverse. Very often I find that the obverse legends are usually more neatly designed, and I can multiply example after example of this. And so what you've got is a division of labor of the people who are engraving the dies. Now, there's probably at least 6 master engravers working the reign of Macrinus, maybe more. Several different ways of presenting the obverse portraits of emperor and son. And furthermore, you've got apprentices and others, and they're engraving these dies in iron. These are men who would have been trained in as goldsmiths, silversmiths, gems. Probably they doubled in these occupations if the mint was inactive. Many of these civic mints, workshops, they go periods where they're not striking money. They're all highly skilled and probably well paid. And they're at the top of the hierarchy. But then you have, okay, that's fine. You have the fellows engraving the dies and you have an order for money. How do you make that money at that point? And I broke it down, and again, in consultation with my colleague who's been writing on the Mint of Potosi and has made some of this available, and this pretty much parallels what's going on in the Spanish Mint. And if you talk to Alan Stahl on the Venetian Mint, Alan would probably say, yeah, pretty much corresponds. There are some different steps. The first thing is delivering the metal and the fuel to the mint, and that is a considerable job that is often overlooked. You had to have a city that was on the highways or on the waterways that could get the charcoal and the metal to turn this stuff into coin. And you would have slaves and freedmen, probably owned by the city or the mint or some such arrangement. They would fire up these furnaces early in the morning, after midnight. You had to reach a high temperature to melt the bronze. And then you would cast the bronze into these molten trees. I have some illustrations of that coming up. And then you would crop off the coin blanks from the trees and collect all the scraps. That was hard work. The team that did that, based on the Potosi Mint, were young and very, very strong men with different types of scissors and clippers. Now, in Potosi, they're cutting silver coins. In Marcianopolis, they would be cutting bronze coins. And these bronze coins are very brittle because of all of the impurities. And that's an important point. Will come up in a moment. So already you've got 4 steps with 4 different teams here. The men who are bringing in the metal, the guys who are working those furnaces, no enviable job, and kept it going. The fellows who are actually doing casting the molten metal into different types of molds. And then the fellows who are turning those cooled blanks, which are probably in trees, and then they have to be rounded as flange. Now, one of the unusual aspects of these coins, and it does appear in Asia Minor at some cities, I'm not sure if it's common in the Levant. Rachel, you'll have to inform me about that, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I just don't know the Levantine coinage nearly as well as I do Asia Minor and Moesia and Thrace. But they seem to have been put on a lathe for rounding and probably flipped on both sides. And that leaves a cavity in the center, which is very, very prominent on many of these coins. Then you move to striking the coins, the flanges themselves. And Professor Wotak at the Kunsthistorische Museum in Vienna has published a tessera, which I'll show in a moment, that shows that the staff, the team striking the coins, were not two but three individuals involved in striking that flan, which we believe was heated and then would be cooled. There may have been a second case of rounding the flans on the wheel. And finally, you have the inventory collecting, making sure everything's okay, pulling any of the problems out. Well, that's a brief breakdown. The way these coins were cast, there's several ways they could have been done. Flans directly, this is pretty standard information. Once they're cooled, however, there's the problem of cutting them and rounding them. And the coins had to be of a certain roundness, apparently, in order to be acceptable in markets. And that's where this peculiar lathing comes in. This is an alternate way of casting. There's several efforts at reconstructing, and this is one version that's been given. It's up online. I've been reading about that a great deal. And of all things, I have a very dear friend who was once my student years ago, who was in the construction business and knows metallurgy. And he looked at these contraptions and he's looked at the coins and said, yeah, what they're doing is they're putting the coin on the lathe and they're rounding it. And the hole, the cavity, is a result of moving that needle to position the coin there. And then they're flipping it over and doing it again. And the result is, this is what you get. You see those cavities in the coins. That does mar the appearance. There appears, the one on the top clearly was done apparently before striking. The one on the bottom seems to be after striking. It may have varied. They may have rounded it before or after, depending on what the flan looked like, or in some cases they did both. But it was important to round them. And if you look at the edges of the coins, they show that they have been shaved. This was tolerated. This was okay in order to get the coins to look round. What's very, very useful about these particular coins is usually the lathing was in the central part of the design where there was no image. So you can see these holes very, very clearly done. On the reverse, they usually mar the reverse figure. And if it's done, after striking, you've lathed it, you strike it. Afterwards, you see that it sometimes has been flattened as a result of the striking. That is part of the production and manufacturing. It has been suggested by several scholars that they may represent certification marks. Certainly that's what I thought at first. And I ran down that dead end for a short time and realized, well, I don't think so. These are not substitute countermarks. And that has to do by studying a number of these specimens and seeing how precisely they seem to be lined up in the center of the coin. They're usually trying to prevent the marring of the design. They don't always succeed, but they usually do. So this meant that you had a whole other team of men working away, lathing the coins, in addition to the other steps I talked about. This is a peculiar feature. And I really was curious, why are they doing this? And it was my friend Jason Sanchez, who's worked with Tong and Sung coins, said, look, you probably are recycling a lot of bronze with tin and lead and other elements, as they did in the later Chinese coinage. And that metal's hard to work. It's particularly brittle, and you don't round it very easily. And if you strike it and there's irregularities, you may have to round it again. He says that's probably why they're doing it, whereas the Imperial Mint was getting higher quality orichalcum or copper. There are some instances of these on the imperial coins, but they really don't show up. That's what I'm convinced. It's part of the production, and it's part of the way of figuring out how large is the team. Now, there we go. We talked about designs. Oop, I'm going in the wrong direction, as usual. My apologies. Here we go. Okay. Here are depictions of, we'll come up to that. You also get a lot of coins, this example on the top that shows a certain cracking. These triangle cracks seem to be very common, which I suspect is because of the striking, or perhaps there was some debris on the tree that was cut that broke it. And what I have seen in my collection is the dies seem to be worked to the maximum. I've got a number of coins, especially from Odysseus and Ptolemais, where you can see the letter forms wearing out, and the inevitable cracks that occur in the dies because they're constantly throwing water on them, cooling them down, restriking, and the result is some extra metal debris might be left in the design. There's also a number of misstrikes. This one is really remarkable in the lower bottom because what probably happened there, if you can look at it, that's supposed to be a coin of Gordian III and Tranquillina, except they probably broke when the three fellows struck it. They probably broke off part of the obverse die and realized, okay, it's broken. It's the end of the day. Turn it around and strike it again. So you get this peculiar image of Tranquillina facing up and down. And what is amazing to me is that these were acceptable in past inspection from the scribes or whoever it was representing the city government. The weight was right. It looked round. They more or less saw it, and it was just passed and put in. And I have got a number of these peculiar misstrikes, which were tolerated probably because of the need to put out the money fairly quickly. This is one of our depictions of the mint shop, Ostia. We believe this is a depiction of the Roman mint. It was one of the reasons why we thought it was always a two-man team. But the unpublished tesserae from Professor Wotek indicates it looks like there's three fellows: the signator, the suppositor, and the mollator. The mollator is the young guy with the hammer. The suppositor is probably holding the coin blanks in position, and the signator is the one who is handing over the blanks and probably making sure they're cool or not. That seems to be the best reconstruction, and the names are attested. The terms are attested in the Flavian inscriptions from the Mint of Rome. Well, why Macrinus? What interests me about Macrinus is the shortness of his reign and the number of portraits that appear. All the portraits depict him with the first shorter beard. He later grew a longer beard to imitate Hadrian, and this has been demonstrated by Curtis Clay looking at the coins of Macrinus, where he reassigned a lot of coins to Antioch, to Rome, saying these are just two different depictions. One is first and one is later. So it's the first design, the first imago that had been sent out. The city's coining, here they are. You've got Nicopolis striking a small issue for the first governor, a very large issue for Pontianus, and another very large issue for Agrippa. The middle one is Marcianopolis. The third one is a few coins of Marcianopolis, but overwhelmingly the coins of Nicopolis at Istra. The way of designing the face-to-face portraits, you had several different ways of doing it. The heads or bust, continuous legend, part of the legend below in the exurg. You can see examples here. Again, notice the coin that I started off with, a very nice specimen showing the design below, and instances where sometimes Diadumenian is actually depicted on the left side. I don't have one of those. I should have. Okay. All of these are suggestive that you've got probably 5 or 6 master engravers working away. And I believe, and this again is my friend Grady saying, that these engravers and the mint had albums of all the standard stereotype designs. They also had the legends and inscriptions, the letter forms that would be needed in Latin or Greek, and then the portraits. Drawing is the best way to do a portrait. And invariably, most coins are profile left, profile right. There are some facing pieces. And this would be the equivalent of what bookmasters, illuminators would have in the early modern age, and undoubtedly there would have been albums. There's also very good evidence that there would be also older coins that the mint had produced. And all of these would be designs. You may get an official imago from the emperor, either in wax or drawings even, we don't know. And then the master engravers would copy and adapt it and then cut the dies. And those pictures would then go into an ever-increasing album. I've also been working recently on coins carried over from Probus into the Tetrarchy, and these would probably be the same engravers. And it's remarkable how at some mints, the continuity in imperial portraits and designs, particularly helmeted types and the like, which were carried over to the Tetrarchy. And these are the same engravers, probably working from older coins or these sort of masters' albums. And then they're again repeated a bit under the coins, for the coins of the Caesar Crispus for several of his first issues. So here's how you can produce these coins in this design. And this, let me see, I'm going backwards again. This gets us to the final slide, and now I can be really outrageous because I'm not sure if any of these numbers are close to reality, but we might as well throw them out. Based on my counting of dies in the museums, the published catalogs, some of the plates very poor, and I have to be very careful, and my own specimens, I think there's 70 obverse dies that were cut from Macrinus and Diadumeni and used at Marcianopolis. For the lesser denominations, smaller counts. For 110 dies, obverse dies used in a 6-month period. Because they all carry the name of the governor. Well, not the smallest denominations, but we assume they were issued at the same time. And then there's a breakdown. If we use the arbitrary number of 30,000 per obverse die, or if you want 20,000, you could adjust the numbers. This is what you get in terms of production. You get an enormous number of coins in 6 months, using up 100,000 pounds of Roman bronze. Those numbers alone, and assuming that there's 100 dies and 3 guys are working each of the dies for an 8-hour day over 6 months, you're looking at a very large staff. Large numbers of workmen turning out the coins, 6 master engravers with a bunch of apprentices, all of the different stages for lathing and the like. You could be looking at a labor force between 500 and 1,000 men involved in this coinage. And they put out the coinage in 6 months and then stopped and shifted over to coins for Nicopolis, ad Istra, which is also a substantial coinage. And I'm still in the stages of counting dies and figuring that one out, but I suspect the figures will come out comparable to the Marcianopolis. That means in order to produce, to maintain a mint, you've got to have the skilled labor, the engravers, the access to fuel and metal, a place. The mint is probably a very compact building with a avenue, a courtyard, and lots of water available, separate rooms partitioned off to do the lathing, the casting, and all. I've looked at the pattern of the mint in Potosi that my colleague is trying to put together. It's only in preliminary drafts. He's not finished it, and it can't be too different from that. And there's only a limited number of cities who probably could afford this. And so Krafft's point of Werkstätte is perfectly plausible, and I think that the coins were struck in situ at the main shop and then shipped out. The end of civic coinage, part of it is inflation driving up costs and everything, but in this part of the world, it's a result of the Gothic invasions. You know, Dexippus tells us about sieges of both Marcianopolis and Philippopolis. The Goths themselves didn't sack the cities, they didn't take the cities or anything like that. But what they did do is wreck the communication system of the Pax Romana, the ability to ship fuel, metal, the ability to ship the coins out. All of that broke down. And that made it increasingly difficult to strike these coins. And the coinage comes to an abrupt end somewhere in the reign of Philip I, who of course was killed in a civil war in 249. And the vast majority of these coins go into the ground, and those have been published in several as hoards and survive in exceptional numbers. The coinage at Tomis, for instance, for some of the reigns like Philip II, is very, very small coinage when lots and lots of specimens. And I bought a lot of specimens. It really comes down to a small number of Aubrey. That was a relatively small coinage. And it's, it's the typical case of surviving in unusually high numbers because of the hoard evidence. And that's true of many of these coins, which made them ideal for me to study because I can get an idea of perhaps how many dies were there. And in my collection, I've not found any major new obverse dies, but I found new reverse dies, new obverse reverse die combinations and the like. But fundamentally, the die count seems to be fairly standard from what I've got so far. There may be some deductions and additions as we move forward. So the point of this is that a civic mint was a really big asset for a city. And to have a mint and be able to produce money, not only for your own city, but for other cities on demand, that meant a lot of money. And the whole point of putting these mints in operation, certainly for the Werkstätter, is to make money by making money. Which is a concept that is thoroughly pleasing to any American. So I close with these remarks, and I know they're preliminary, and some of them are even questionable, but I invite comments, criticisms, and hopefully it's been helpful for you.